Hello, this is Buona from Buona.tv, and I want to take a question from Brian Tim, who sent the question. He actually sent me a message on Twitter first, asking me what's the best way to get a hold of me to ask a question. I said, just send an email to help@Buona.tv. That's what he did today, and it's a doozy. Brian is full of questions, man. He's full of questions. Okay, he says, so I've got some questions. First, I want to say thanks for the great review of the HP Mini 1000. You're welcome. Once they go on sale, I'll be getting myself one with the SSD option, most likely. He says, you really have a great personal brand going and your videos are awesome. So then he goes on to ask some questions. First question is, do you think that there are people interested in hearing about what tech is the best bang for your buck, and or tech news and reviews from a college student's viewpoint? And I think you're asking this because you may be thinking about doing this. I think there's a need for that. I get a lot of questions from people who ask me, I got $300. What's the best laptop I can get? Or what's the cheapest netbook I can get where I don't have to compromise on battery life? Or what's the a common one is, what is a cheap way of doing what you do in terms of podcasting, in terms of videos? And that's one of his follow-up questions. But there's a need for that. I think people want to know some low-cost alternatives to producing content, to buying tech stuff, and just I think there's a whole market for cheap alternatives to tech, especially in this economy. So I think that's a great way to go. Number two, what software are you using to publish those awesome videos? And how did you set up your podcast and RSS feeds? Not just for blogs, but for podcasts too. And a flowchart-esque diagram would be sweet here. I don't think I can give you a flowchart, Brian. But the software I use, I just recently did a video called A Podcast Tutorial. Look on my channel for that. I give you a walkthrough of the podcast software I use. It's called Ubercaster. And I'll talk about some of the alternatives you can use. One was Audacity. And there's some other things you can do as well. But that's how I do my audio podcast. For video, I'm using a Canon PowerShot TX1. And this is a 720p camera. But you can find a cheaper alternative. There's a Kodak ZI7, I believe it's called. There's also there's a Flip Minnow HD, which is not getting that good of reviews. The Kodak's getting better reviews. And there's also some other cameras you can get that are cheaper that give you high definition quality. High definition is gaining in popularity, so I started there. Or you can just get a cheap Flip Minnow or webcam to do your videos. Software wise, I'm using nothing but QuickTime Pro right now. QuickTime Pro is what I use to do the, you'll see there it is, probably be here. You'll see an overlaid logo on the video. I use QuickTime Pro to do that, and that's pretty much all I use it for, is to trim the beginning and end and to add a logo. That's all I use software wise. In terms of encoding, I use Visual Hub. Visual Hub is no longer being made, however, so you're going to have to find yourself an alternative piece of software or wait for the open source version to come out, which is called what is it? Some sort of I don't remember the name. I can never remember the name of it because it's not really out yet. But that's the software I use, and this is all on Mac. Now you can do the same stuff on Windows. I'm not knocking Windows. I'm just telling you how I do it. On Windows you can use Super to do encoding, very good encoder there. QuickTime works on Windows as well. You may not like QuickTime, you may like it, so it's up to you. Any tips on developing a personal brand? Tips on marketing yourself and getting started in the blogo Twittersphere? This is a loaded question. Any tips on developing a personal brand? I don't even know how I did it. I didn't realize I had done it till somebody else said I did it. What I did was I participated. You'll notice that in a lot of networks that I join, which include Twitter, which include FriendFeed, even my own live.buona.tv community, I really try to avoid streaming unless I can participate in some form or fashion. Participation is very important. Now, participation alone is not going to develop a personal brand. It was one of the things that got me going. the more I participated, the more my name was familiar, and the more my picture became familiar to people. I even caught the eye of Leo Laporte. To this day, I don't know how I did that, but it happened. And that's how that took off. But be yourself. That's one tip. Don't try to be like somebody else. Don't try to be like me. Don't try to be like, Chris Pirillo. Don't try to be like Leo Laporte. Don't try to be like Robert Scoble. Don't try to be like Steve Rubel. Try to be yourself. Don't try to be yourself. Be yourself. Dude, there is no try. Coffee. So be yourself. That's the main thing I can do. I really don't know what else to tell you because I don't know the formula. I just participated and I was being myself, and people know this. Where's the donate link on your website, and how did you get it? The donate site, the donate link on my site is Bwana.tv/donations. I just did a video on this. You'll see it soon. And there's several ways to donate. You can give me coffee. You can give me 55 cents or whatever. But going back to the third question, the second question. In terms of my RSS feeds, I use a piece of software called Feeder. I didn't talk about this. I use a piece of software called Feeder, which I can create RSS feeds, and you can create a podcast without even having to have a blog. So if you don't want to go through the hassle of creating a blog, you can just use Feeder and create an RSS feed. But you'll have to have some place to host it. That's important. And that's it. He says, feel free to make this a video podcast or something else if you want. I know there's a lot of content here. I just appreciate an answer. So here's your answer, Brian. Hopefully this helped. And one thing that I want to encourage you to do, he says he was thinking of calling his blog Tim on Tech, because most of his friends call him Tim. Do it. That's my recommendation. Go ahead and do it. Be consistent with it. Be more consistent than me, because people were looking for me to do my podcast last night and I wasn't here because I was sick. But that's a whole different thing. Try to be consistent as possible, and I think when you are consistent and you be yourself, and you're passionate about what you do, go back and watch my podcast tutorial and I talk about motivation. If you're passionate about what you do, people will notice. You can't fake passion. People see right through it. So those are my tips for you, Brian. All right, this is Bwana from Bwana.tv answering Brian Tim. Thank you, Brian. And keep the questions coming. If you got any questions, send them to help@Bwana.tv. And I'll get them answered as soon as I can. All right, guys, take care.